The sky burned orange as a metallic object tore through Earth's atmosphere, leaving a fiery trail visible even in daylight. At Global Space Initiative headquarters, alarms blared. Screens flashed with trajectory calculations, while analysts shouted coordinates. Dr. Tae-ho Kim rushed from his laboratory, almost colliding with Director Park, who grabbed his shoulders. "It's definitely not one of ours," Director Park said, thrusting a tablet showing the object's telemetry data into Tae-ho's hands. "Not Russian, not Chinese. Velocity and entry angle suggest advanced propulsion." Tae-ho studied the readings, his heart racing. "It's slowing down." "Exactly. Natural objects don't do that." The director lowered his voice. "Whatever it is, we need you there first." Within 30 minutes, Tae-ho was aboard a helicopter, equipment hastily packed. As they flew over dense forest toward the calculated landing zone, he tried to control his excitement. After 15 years studying theoretical alien biology, he might finally see actual proof of extraterrestrial life. 5 minutes to target, the pilot announced as they circled above a small clearing in the forest. Smoke rose from disturbed earth, but there was no fire, no crater, just a silver-blue oval object half buried in soil. It was smaller than Tae-ho expected, perhaps 3 meters long, with a surface that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. "Stay back," Tae-ho instructed the 2 security officers who accompanied him. "I need first observations before contamination." He approached slowly, scanner in hand. The object gave off no radiation, no heat signature. Its surface appeared metallic, but moved like water when caught in sunlight. Tae-ho reached the edge of the small depression where the object rested and knelt to examine it closer. Without warning, the capsule's surface rippled violently. Tae-ho stumbled backward as a seam appeared, widening into an opening. Light poured out, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, a figure stood before him. Female in form, she was tall and slender with pale blue skin that shimmered with an inner light. Her features were almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face with eyes, nose, and mouth, but subtly different in ways that marked her as definitely not from Earth. Her eyes were larger, completely black without whites or visible pupils. Her fingers were longer, with an extra joint. Fine, silver-white hair floated around her head as if underwater. Tae-ho froze. Years of training and preparation vanished from his mind. He could only stare as the being took one unsteady step toward him. "Dr. Kim," one of the security officers called, weapon raised. "Step away." But Tae-ho couldn't move. The alien's gaze locked with his. Her lips, darker blue than her skin, parted. "Take me, I'm yours," she said in perfect, unaccented English. Then her eyes rolled back, her knees buckled, and she collapsed. Tae-ho lunged forward instinctively, catching her before she hit the ground. She was surprisingly light in his arms, her skin cool to the touch. "Get a medical kit," he shouted, lowering her gently to the ground. He checked for breathing. Yes, but shallow and rapid. A pulse at her neck, present but different from human rhythm, with strange pauses between beats. The security team approached cautiously. "Sir, we should wait for the containment unit." "She needs help now," Tae-ho insisted, opening his field kit. He attached monitoring sensors to her skin, watching as completely unfamiliar readings appeared on his device. "How did she know English?" the younger officer whispered. Tae-ho shook his head. More importantly, why those specific words? The alien stirred slightly. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing those bottomless black eyes again. "Can you understand me?" Tae-ho asked gently. She nodded weakly. "I'm Dr. Kim. You're safe. We'll help you." The alien reached up with trembling fingers and touched Tae-ho's cheek. Her skin felt like cool silk. When she pulled her hand away, Tae-ho was startled to see it left a faint, glowing residue on his skin that quickly faded. "They're coming," she whispered, voice strained. "Had to warn. Find someone who would listen." Then she passed out again, as the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. The next hours passed in blur. A containment team arrived, setting up a field lab around the crash site. The alien was placed in a specialized medical pod, while the capsule was secured for transport. Taiho refused to leave her side, insisting on accompanying the medical team back to GSI headquarters. During transport, he studied her vital signs, trying to make sense of her biology. Her cellular structure appeared similar to Earth life, but with key differences that defied explanation. Her blood carried oxygen but was green rather than red. Most remarkable was her neural activity, off the charts compared to human baseline. "She's dreaming," he told the medical officer. "Look at these patterns." "If that's what it is," the officer replied cautiously. "Could be anything with a physiology we don't understand." At GSI headquarters, a secure medical facility had been prepared. Government officials were already arriving, along with military personnel. Taiho knew the politics would soon take over, but for now, his expertise kept him in charge of the alien's care. Alone with her in the medical bay, Taiho reviewed the preliminary scans. Her internal organs showed logical arrangement, suggesting an evolutionary path not entirely different from Earth life. Yet other aspects, particularly her nervous system, were completely foreign. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Where did you come from?" As if hearing him, the alien's eyes opened. Taiho stepped closer, heart pounding. "Hello again," he said softly. "You're at a secure facility. We're trying to help you." She studied him silently, then looked around the room, taking in the equipment and monitors. "Thank you for catching me," she finally said. Her voice was musical, with strange harmonics underneath her words. "You speak our language," Taiho observed. "How?" "I learned from your transmissions. For many cycles, we've been listening." "We?" "There are more of you." Pain crossed her face. "There were. I am. What remains?" Taiho pulled a chair closer. "What's your name? What should I call you?" She seemed to consider this. "In your sounds, Jaya would be close." "Jaya," he repeated. "I'm Taiho." "I know." She smiled slightly. "I chose you." "Chose me? What do you mean?" Before she could answer, alarms sounded. Guards entered the room, followed by Director Park and two stern-looking government officials. "Dr. Kim, you're needed for debriefing," Director Park said firmly. "The security team will take over here." Taiho looked back at Jaya, who was watching the newcomers with obvious apprehension. "I'll be back," he promised her. "You're safe here." Jaya's black eyes fixed on his. "No one is safe," she whispered. "That's why I came." As Taiho was led from the room, his mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why had she come to Earth? What did she mean about choosing him? And most troubling, what danger had followed her across the stars? 3 days had passed since Jaya arrived on Earth. She now sat in a comfortable but secure room at the GSI facility, surrounded by medical equipment and monitoring devices. The walls were white, the furniture simple but functional. 2 armed guards stood outside her door at all times. Taiho entered carrying a tray with food and water. He had barely slept since the landing, dividing his time between analyzing data from Jaya's ship and checking on her recovery. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, setting the tray down. Jaya looked better. Her blue skin had regained its subtle glow, and she moved with more strength. "My body heals," she said, examining the food curiously. "But my mind remains heavy." Taiho sat across from her. Behind him, a camera recorded everything. He knew at least 5 government agencies were watching their interaction. "The officials have questions," he said gently. "Many questions. They're concerned about why you're here." Jaya picked up a piece of fruit, studying it before taking a small bite. "Yes, that is natural." She set the fruit down and looked directly at Taiho. "I am ready to explain." Director Park and 2 senior officials entered the room. They sat at a respectful distance from Jaya, their faces carefully neutral. "We appreciate your cooperation, Director Park began formally. For our records, can you state your full name and origin? In your language, I am Jaya, she replied. I come from a world called Nilari, third planet of the star you name HD 40,307, approximately 42 light-years from Earth. One official raised his eyebrows. That's a known exoplanet. We've studied it. Yes, Jaya nodded. We detected your observations. Your instruments are primitive but impressive for your development stage. Why have you come to Earth? Director Park asked directly. Jaya's expression darkened. I am a refugee, the last of my kind. Her voice trembled slightly. My civilization is gone, destroyed by beings we call the Voidborn. The room fell silent. Taiho leaned forward. What happened? The Voidborn found our star system 2 years ago. They are not like us, or you. They consume not just resources or energy, but entire worlds. Their technology is beyond anything we had. Jaya's black eyes seemed to look beyond the room, into painful memory. Our population was over 8 billion. Within months, less than 1 million remained. Those who survived launched escape ships to different systems. How many ships? One official asked sharply. 13, Jaya replied. I do not know if any others survived. Our communications ceased shortly after departure. Director Park cleared his throat. Why Earth specifically? Why not another system? We had been studying your transmissions for decades. Your species shows unusual potential despite your technological limitations. We chose potential landing sites carefully. We? Taiho asked. Jaya touched her temple. Before the end, our scientists transferred a complete neural archive of our civilization into selected individuals. I carry the collective memory of my species, their history, science, culture, all preserved within me. The officials exchanged glances. One wrote something on his tablet. You must understand, Director Park said carefully, that we need to verify your claims. Your arrival raises security concerns. Jaya nodded. I expected this. I am willing to share knowledge as proof of my sincerity. Over the next several hours, Jaya answered hundreds of questions. She described Nilari technology, provided stellar coordinates unknown to Earth astronomers, and explained details of her physiology. Taiho remained by her side, occasionally clarifying scientific terms or asking follow-up questions. When the officials finally left, Taiho stayed behind. Jaya looked exhausted. You should rest, he said. Jaya shook her head. There is too little time for rest. She reached out hesitantly, then pulled her hand back. There is something I must show you alone. She placed her palm against her ship's surface, which had been brought to the facility for study. The metal rippled, and a small compartment appeared. From it, she removed a crystal-like device that glowed with inner light. This contains detailed information about the Voidborn, she explained. Their patterns, technology, weaknesses, too dangerous to share widely yet. Why show me? Taiho asked. Because I chose you, Jaya said simply. When I scanned your world from orbit, your mind pattern showed empathy and scientific understanding in equal measure. Rare qualities. Taiho hesitated. The government won't like secrets. It is not secrecy, but caution, Jaya replied. Your leaders remain uncertain of my intentions. Some suspect I might be an advanced scout for invasion. Are you? Taiho asked directly. Jaya's expression softened. No, I am exactly what I claim. The last keeper of a dead civilization, seeking refuge and offering mourning. Their conversation was interrupted by Director Park's return. He looked grim. The International Security Council wants to move Jaya to a different facility, he told Taiho. Military controlled. Tomorrow morning. That's unnecessary, Taiho protested. She's cooperating fully. Not my decision, Director Park replied. There's concern about containing potential biological or technological threats. After he left, Taiho turned to Jaya apologetically. "I'll try to remain your handler." "I understand their fear," Jaya said. "But separation would be unwise. The knowledge transfer requires continuity." That night, Taiho couldn't sleep. He reviewed the data from Jaya's interviews, comparing her statements with known astronomical facts. Everything checked out, yet something still bothered him. The next morning, while preparing for Jaya's transfer, Taiho received an urgent message. One of GSI's deep space monitoring stations had detected an anomaly, a brief energy spike at the edge of the solar system. When he entered Jaya's room, her expression told him she already knew. "You sensed it?" he asked. She nodded grimly. "A Voidborn scout. They found this system." "How? Did they follow you?" "Possibly. Or perhaps they detected your world independently." Jaya stood up, suddenly looking stronger and more determined. "Your leaders must now decide quickly. Will they listen to me as a refugee with vital knowledge, or waste time questioning my motives?" Taiho made his decision. "What do we need to do? First, I must show your scientists how to modify your detection systems. The Voidborn use specific frequencies to communicate. If we can intercept those, we'll know their numbers and intentions." "I'll arrange it," Taiho promised. As they prepared to leave for the military facility, Jaya touched Taiho's arm. "There is something else you should understand," she said quietly. "When I said, 'Take me, I'm yours,' it was not random. It was a phrase our scientists believed would resonate with human protective instincts." "You were using psychology on me?" Taiho asked, surprised. Jaya shook her head. "Not manipulation. Recognition. Your species has something mine lacked, a fierce drive to protect others, even strangers. We hoped that quality might help us both survive what's coming." Taiho looked into her alien eyes and saw fear there, but also something else. Hope. And suddenly he understood that humanity's future was now inextricably linked with the legacy Jaya carried within her. The military facility looked cold and unwelcoming. High concrete walls surrounded a complex of gray buildings. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter while security cameras tracked every movement. Inside, white corridors and sterile rooms made the place feel more like a prison than a research center. Yet within 1 month, those same stark rooms buzzed with excitement. Scientists and engineers from around the world gathered in what they now called Exchange Lab 1. At the center of the activity stood Jaya, her blue skin contrasting with the white lab coats surrounding her. "The key is not the material itself," she explained, manipulating a 3D model floating above a specialized display table. "It's the lattice structure at the quantum level." The scientists watched in amazement as Jaya's fingers rearranged particles in the simulation. The molecular configuration shifted, transforming from an ordinary conductor into something entirely new. "This will increase energy transfer efficiency by approximately 400%, while reducing heat loss to near zero," she said. Dr. Yoon, a renowned physicist, shook his head in wonder. "This would have taken us decades to discover on our own." In another room, Taiho reviewed reports of Jaya's contributions over the past weeks. Energy systems that could extract power from atmospheric movement. Medical procedures that could repair damaged neural tissue. Materials lighter than carbon fiber but stronger than diamond. The list grew daily. Director Park entered, looking both pleased and concerned. "The International Council is impressed," he said, sitting across from Taiho. "But some members worry about how quickly we're implementing these technologies." "We don't have the luxury of caution," Taiho replied. "Not with what's coming." Since detecting the Voidborn scout ship, Earth's governments had moved with unprecedented cooperation. The United Nations had formed a special defense committee, and resources poured into adapting Jaya's knowledge for protective purposes. "How is she handling all this?" Director Park asked more softly. Taiho hesitated. "Physically, she's fine. But I'm concerned about her mental state. She's working constantly, barely rests." "And what does she ask for in return?" "Just knowledge. About us. Our history, art, literature. She's particularly interested in how humans have survived and adapted through our history. Director Park nodded. The council has approved your request. She can leave the facility, with proper security, of course. The next day, Taiho drove Jaya to a national park 2 hours from the facility. 4 security vehicles accompanied them, but kept a respectful distance. It was Jaya's first time seeing Earth beyond concrete walls and research labs. She stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast forest, eyes wide with wonder. Wind blew her silver-white hair around her face as she breathed deeply. "Your world has such variety," she said quietly. "On Nilari, much of our surface was covered by shallow seas. We had few mountains like these. What else was different?" Tahoe asked, standing beside her. "Our sky was more purple than blue. Our days were longer." She paused, touching a nearby tree trunk gently. But there were trees. Different, but still trees. Taiho watched as she explored the area, examining flowers and insects with childlike curiosity. Despite her vast knowledge, there was something innocent about Jaya's exploration of Earth. "Your species adapted to so many environments," Jaya observed later as they ate lunch on a rocky outcrop. "Desert, Arctic, forest, plains. The Nilari never spread so widely across our planet. Necessity," Taiho explained. "We had to adapt to survive." "That's what makes you unique," Jaya said. "My people were thinkers, philosophers, scientists. When the Voidborn came, we had no experience with conflict, no adaptability." Over the next weeks, Taiho took Jaya to more places, a bustling city market where she marveled at the diversity of humans living together, a museum where she spent hours studying Earth's natural history, a concert where she sat mesmerized by the music, tears sliding down her blue cheeks. After each excursion, they would talk late into the night. Jaya shared stories of Nilari culture, their art forms, their family structures, their spiritual beliefs. In turn, Tahoe explained human concepts like nationalism, religion, and love. "Your species feels emotions so intensely," Jaya observed one evening as they sat in the facility's garden area. "The Nilari valued emotional control." "Does that mean you don't feel emotions?" Tahoe asked. Jaya smiled, an expression she had adopted from humans. "We feel them, but differently. More gently. Except grief." Her face darkened. "Grief I now understand as humans do." Without thinking, Taiho reached out and took her hand. Her skin felt cool against his. When she didn't pull away, he realized something had changed between them. Their relationship, once purely professional, had evolved into friendship, and perhaps something more. The moment was interrupted by an urgent alert on Taiho's communication device. They hurried to the monitoring station, where several technicians stared at screens displaying strange patterns of energy readings. "It started 10 minutes ago," the lead technician explained. "Using the modifications Jaya showed us for the deep space array." Jaya studied the readings, her body tensing. "Communication pulses, 2 Voidborn vessels, exchanging information." "What are they saying?" Tahoe asked. "I cannot translate exactly, but the pattern suggests a confirmation signal." Jaya looked at him, fear evident in her black eyes. They'd found this system, and they're reporting back. That night, the facility became a flurry of activity. Military officials arrived for emergency meetings. Scientists worked frantically to implement defensive technologies based on Jaya's knowledge. In a quiet moment between crisis meetings, Tahoe found Jaya alone in her lab, manipulating a complex simulation of the solar system. "We have perhaps 3 months before they arrive in force," she said without looking up. "The scout vessels are faster than I expected. Is there enough time?" Tahoe asked. Jaya finally turned to him. "To prepare completely?" "No. But to have a chance?" "Yes." She hesitated, then added, "If your people truly embrace their greatest strength." "Which is?" "Adaptation under pressure. Creativity in crisis." She moved closer to him. The Nilari would analyze, theorize, plan, and be destroyed while doing so. Humans act, improvise, fight. Taiho nodded slowly. Then we'll fight. Jaya reached up and touched his face, a gesture she had never made before. There is something I haven't told you, she whispered. Something important about why I chose Earth. Why I chose you. Before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the monitors, new energy signatures appeared, larger and closer than before. They're coming faster than I calculated, Jaya said, her voice tight with fear. We need to prepare now. As they rushed to join the emergency response team, Taiho realized that whatever Jaya had been about to reveal would have to wait. The future of both their species now depended on what happened next. The knowledge exchange had given Earth a fighting chance. But would it be enough? The once secret military facility now served as Earth's primary defense headquarters. What had been isolated research labs 6 weeks ago had expanded into a sprawling complex. New buildings rose daily. Aircraft landed constantly, bringing scientists, military personnel, and equipment from around the world. Taiho barely recognized the place. The silent corridors now hummed with activity. What amazed him most was the unprecedented cooperation. Americans worked alongside Russians. Chinese engineers collaborated with Europeans, historical enemies now united by a common threat. In the central command room, giant screens displayed the solar system. Red markers showed the approaching void-borne vessels, no longer just scouts, but a fleet of what Jaya called harvester ships. They'll reach Saturn's orbit in approximately 42 days. General Kang announced to the assembled leaders. Our window for preparation is narrowing. Jaya stood at the front of the room, her blue skin looking paler under the harsh lights. For weeks, she had worked tirelessly, sleeping only a few hours each night. Despite her exhaustion, she spoke clearly. We've completed the modifications to your satellite defense grid, she said, gesturing to a display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure. The energy shields should now withstand initial void-borne weaponry. Should, questioned a Russian official skeptically. Without actual combat testing, we cannot be certain, Jaya admitted. But the simulations show 87% effectiveness. Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations nodded. Better odds than we had a month ago. What about the ground-based weapons systems? Jaya brought up new schematics. The integration of Nilari particle acceleration technology with your existing missile systems is proceeding ahead of schedule. 36 launch platforms are operational, with 24 more nearing completion. The meeting continued for hours. When it finally ended, Taiho found Jaya alone in a small side room, staring at data streams on a tablet. You should rest, he said gently. Jaya looked up, her black eyes showing fatigue. There's no time. There's always time, Taiho insisted, taking the tablet from her hands. Even in crisis, especially in crisis, we need rest to think clearly. She didn't protest as he led her outside. The facility had a small garden area where they often walked when she needed a break from the windowless labs. Tonight, stars shone brightly overhead. I've been meaning to ask you something, Taiho said as they sat on a bench. That first day, when you collapsed in my arms, you said, they're coming. You already knew the Voidborn had followed you. Jaya was quiet for a long moment. Not specifically, but I knew they would eventually find this system, with or without following me. That's why I had to prepare your people. There's more you haven't told me, Taiho said. It wasn't a question. Jaya sighed, a very human gesture she had adopted. Yes, the full truth is complicated. We have time tonight, Taiho said. Jaya looked up at the stars. Earth wasn't randomly selected as my destination. For over 3 centuries, the Nilari observed your transmissions, study your development. When the Voidborn threat emerged, our strategic analysis indicated that of all the species we had discovered, humans had the highest probability of survival. Taiho blinked in surprise. Why us? We're technologically behind your civilization. Technology isn't everything, Jaya said. The Nilari were technologically superior to humans in almost every way. Yet we were nearly exterminated in months. What do we have that you didn't? Several crucial psychological traits: adaptability under pressure, creativity in crisis, and most importantly, Jaya turned to face him directly, fierce protectiveness, the willingness to fight not just for yourself, but for others, even strangers. Taiho remembered something, that first phrase you said to me, "Take me, I'm yours." That wasn't random either, was it? Jaya shook her head. Our researchers found that specific phrase would likely trigger human protective instincts. It was calculated. Taiho wasn't sure how to feel about this revelation. You manipulated me from the beginning. Not manipulation, Jaya said quickly. Strategy. We needed to ensure that whoever found me would listen, would care. She hesitated. But what I didn't anticipate was how much I would come to care in return. Before Taiho could respond, his communication device buzzed urgently. General Kang's voice came through, tense and clipped. "Dr. Kim, bring Jaya to command immediately." New developments. They hurried back inside. The command center was filled with grim-faced officials staring at the main display. The red markers representing voidborn vessels had changed position dramatically. "They've accelerated," General Kang said without preamble. "Much faster than we predicted. New arrival estimate, 15 days. The room erupted in concerned voices. Secretary General Martinez raised his hands for silence. "How is this possible?" he asked Jaya. "You said we had more time." "They must have deployed their space-fold drives earlier than expected," Jaya replied, studying the data. "It's a technology they typically reserve for final approach." "Why would they do that?" Taiho asked. Jaya's expression darkened. "Because they detected our preparations. They know we're ready for them." "Then we've lost the element of surprise," General Kang concluded. "Not necessarily," Jaya said, her voice suddenly stronger. "This presents an opportunity. If they're using spacefold technology now, their energy reserves will be depleted upon arrival. They'll be vulnerable for a short period while their systems recharge." She moved quickly to the central console, fingers flying over the controls. "We need to accelerate deployment of the orbital platforms, and the lunar-based defenses must be activated immediately." For the next hour, Jia outlined a revised defense strategy, adapting human military tactics to counter voidborn technology. The human leaders listened with growing confidence as she explained how their combined approach might exploit this unexpected vulnerability. When the meeting ended, Taiho caught Jaya looking at him with an odd expression. "What is it?" he asked. "This," she gestured around the room, at the humans working frantically but efficiently, "is exactly why the Nilari chose your species. In less than 2 months, you've adapted our technology, improved it, and created defensive systems we never imagined. Where the Nilari would hesitate, analyze, and deliberate, humans act." Later that night, as they worked side by side calibrating the new weapons system, Jaya suddenly stopped. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone." Taiho set down his tools. "What is it?" "The neural archive I carry, the collective memory of my species. It wasn't meant to just preserve our history." Jaya's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "It contains genetic memory that can be transferred. If I die, the knowledge dies with me. But if I survive, and if we succeed—" "What?" Taiho prompted. "The Nilari could live again, in a way, combined with human genetics, creating something new. Not just an alliance of species, but eventually a true union." She looked at him with uncertainty. "Does that frighten you?" Taiho thought about it, then slowly shook his head. "No. If anything, it gives us one more reason to fight." Outside the facility, construction crews worked through the night, building launch platforms and communications arrays. In orbit, astronauts from a dozen countries modified satellites with Nilari technology. On the far side of the moon, A hastily constructed base prepared powerful energy weapons. Earth was preparing for war, and for the first time since the Voidborn began their campaign of destruction, they would face an enemy ready to fight back. The darkness of space lit up with bursts of energy as the first Voidborn ships breached the outer defenses near Jupiter's orbit. The massive alien vessels resembled black spires, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Earth's combined fleet, hastily retrofitted with Nilari technology, moved to intercept. In the Lunar Command Center, Taiho and Jaya watched the holographic battle display with tense expressions. After months of preparation, the moment of truth had arrived. First wave performing as expected, General Kang reported. The shield modifications are holding. On the display, Earth vessels fired concentrated energy beams that cut through Voidborn shields, something Jaya had once thought impossible. The combination of Nilari precision and human battle tactics was working. They're adapting, Jaya warned as the enemy ships began changing formation. This is their pattern. They learn quickly. New energy signatures appeared at the edge of the display. Second wave incoming, announced the sensor officer. Much larger than anticipated. Jaya studied the readings, her blue skin paling. That's their command vessel. A hive intelligence coordinates from there. She looked at Taiho with wide black eyes. They've committed their central control to this battle. They never did that against the Nilari. Is that good or bad? Secretary General Martinez asked. Both, Jaya replied. It means they consider Earth a serious threat, but it also means their entire operation is vulnerable if we can reach the command ship. Taiho saw the idea forming in Jaya's mind before she spoke it. No, he said firmly. It's too dangerous. It's our only chance, Jaya countered. If we destroy their hive intelligence, the entire fleet becomes disorganized. The ship's defenses are designed to repel external attacks, not infiltration. You're suggesting a boarding party, General Kang asked incredulously. Precisely, Jaya said. A small team could bypass their main defenses using a modified shuttle with Nilari cloaking technology. The room erupted in debate. Eventually, against strong objections, the plan was approved. Not because it was safe, but because there was no alternative. 2 hours later, Taiho found himself commanding a small team of elite soldiers aboard an experimental craft heading straight toward the massive Voidborn command ship. The vessel had been rebuilt using Jaya's specifications, capable of passing through Voidborn detection systems. Remember, Jaya said from her position at the ship's neural interface, once inside, we'll have approximately 20 minutes before they detect our presence. Taiho nodded grimly. Their mission was clear. Reach the central processing core, plant specially designed disruptors, and escape before detonation. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in execution. Approaching outer defensive perimeter, the pilot announced. Cloaking systems at maximum. Everyone held their breath as they passed between massive Voidborn vessels. Outside, the battle continued, Earth forces drawing attention away from their approach. They're not seeing us, Jaya confirmed, monitoring the enemy's communication frequencies. Their ship attached to the hull of the command vessel with barely a sound. Cutting tools quickly created an entry point, and the team moved inside. The interior of the Voidborn ship was unlike anything Taiho had imagined. No corridors or rooms as humans would build, but organic-looking channels that pulsed with dark energy. The air felt thick, charged with electricity. This way, Jaya whispered, consulting a small device that mapped energy flows. The core is located centrally. They moved silently through the strange environment, encountering few Voidborn. Those they did see barely resembled life forms, more like shifting masses of dark matter with occasional glowing points where eyes might be. They're drones, Jaya explained quietly, extensions of the hive mind, not individuals. As they approached the core, resistance increased. Guards appeared, larger Voidborn entities wielding energy weapons. The human soldiers engaged them with modified pulse rifles, creating surprisingly effective results. They don't understand individual combat, Taiho realized as they fought their way forward. They're used to mass warfare, not small unit tactics. Finally, they reached a massive chamber where dark energy swirled around a central pillar of shifting matter. The hive intelligence. Plant the disruptors at these points, Jaya instructed, indicating specific locations. The team worked quickly while Jaya approached the central column. "What are you doing?" Taiho asked urgently. "We need to leave." "One moment," Jaya replied, placing her hands against the pulsing surface. "I can access their knowledge network, learn their weaknesses, their plans." Her body stiffened as dark energy flowed around her hands. Taiho moved to pull her away, but she held firm. "Almost there," she gasped. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The Voidborn had detected them. "Jaya! Now!" Taiho shouted. She pulled back suddenly, her eyes glowing with strange energy. "Got it. Let's go." They fought their way back to their ship, losing 2 soldiers in the process. As they detached from the Voidborn vessel, explosions began rippling through its structure. "Did it work?" Taiho asked as their ship accelerated away. Jaya nodded, still recovering from her connection to the hive mind. "Yes, but I learned something else. The Voidborn aren't natural beings. They're weapons created by something even worse, something coming from beyond the galaxy." Their small craft shuddered as shockwaves from the exploding command ship hit them. On their view screen, they watched as the massive vessel broke apart, energy cascading through its structure. Throughout the solar system, Voidborn ships began moving erratically, their coordinated attack falling into chaos. Earth's forces pressed the advantage, destroying the disorganized enemy ships one by one. 3 months later, Taiho stood on a platform overlooking the massive hangar where Earth's first true interstellar vessel neared completion. The ship, named Unity, incorporated the best of both human and Nilari technology. Jaya stood beside him, looking healthier than she had in months. Since the battle, she had begun working with volunteer scientists on a program she called Preservation and Continuation. Through a carefully designed process, Nilari genetic memory could be shared with compatible humans, ensuring her civilization's knowledge would never be lost. "The ship will be ready for launch next week," Taiho said, watching workers apply final touches to the sleek hull. "And its mission?" Jaya asked. "Exploration, primarily, but also to warn other systems about the Voidborn and what might be coming behind them." Jaya nodded thoughtfully. "The first of many ships, I hope." "The construction of 5 more begins next month," Taiho confirmed. "Your people's knowledge combined with our determination has changed everything." Jaya smiled, a gesture she had once had to practice, but now came naturally. Not just knowledge and determination. Something else made this possible. "What's that?" She took his hand, her blue fingers intertwining with his. Connection. The Nilari were brilliant but isolated, even from each other. Humans connect, form bonds, fight for each other. That's your true strength. Taiho squeezed her hand gently. "Our strength now." Later that evening, they stood on the observation deck of the space station, Earth glowing blue and green below them. Beyond, the stars beckoned. "We'll be ready next time," Taiho said, thinking of what Jaya had learned about the greater threat behind the Voidborn. "Yes," she agreed, "but not just to fight. To explore, to connect with other civilizations. The Nilari isolated themselves out of fear. Humans reach out despite fear." She placed her hand against the viewport, as if reaching for the stars themselves. Her reflection showed something new, subtle changes in her features, the first visible signs of the gradual merger of Nilari and human. Not just in her, but in the volunteers who carried portions of her people's memory and genetic code. "We are no longer just human or Nilari," she said softly. "We're becoming something new, something better." As if in response, a shooting star traced a bright line across the darkness. Not a harbinger of invasion this time, but a symbol of humanity's new path. No longer alone in the cosmos, no longer confined to one world, humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming guardians of the galaxy. And it had all begun with those simple words, "Take me on yours."